Okie dokie. Hey everybody, welcome to Mural Joe Live. It's been a while since we've tried this, and we're giving the broadcasting from the YouTube channel a try. So we'll see how that goes. I'll appreciate your patience as we try to fumble through the technical difficulties of it, but I'm thinking it'll go pretty well. So I'm hoping that we can get a lot of comments and questions going during this. I get emailed more and more questions these days directly to my email and on the Facebook page, and I always feel terrible that I don't get to all of them. And a lot of times, it's somebody genuinely trying to get through a difficult point on a job, and believe me, I know exactly what that's like. And I'm hoping that I can do more of these live broadcasts where you can join in and ask questions live, and I can just take care of everything right there in one place. So something that I've been seeing a lot of lately is a lot of questions about what for my whole career, what colors do you use? That's the main question, But I want to do a painting with a lot of diverse colors so that those questions will hopefully pop up and I can answer a lot. And I recently posted on Facebook a chart that has been really helpful to me in understanding the changing of the hue of a color as it's more in the shadow or more in the light. So I'm going to paint a picture of maybe some fall leaves with a bunch of colors, have fun doing something seasonal, and show, demonstrate again how those changing hues make things look a lot more natural if you know how to apply it. Maybe I'll put some water and rocks in there too. All the time I'm trying to do a good job of answering questions about how to paint rocks and water and reflection. A lot of the time I don't know how to answer. I try to restrict my answers to the things that I've actually experimented, tested, and know that it's the right answer. I don't like to just pump out answers just for the sake of having one if it's not actually going to help you get further in your own work. It's very important to me to answer things correctly. I always try to be careful with my words and descriptions. All right. So big thanks to Todd, who is the technician back here.
Hey.
He's this is his studio that we're using, and they normally broadcast Show It Live, which is a live show for his company that all of their photographers and clients like to tune into. They have a great social network going, and he's letting me use the studio because this is all way too much technical difficulty for me to handle. I'm just the artist. I tried broadcasting out of Flagstaff, where I live, and that was just so hard, technical difficulty. So it's nice to have the studio. Huge thanks to Todd and Show It. So I'm thinking the first thing I should do is put a sky in there, and this is a good opportunity to demonstrate how to do a gradient. I get asked about gradients all the time, and I'm working on a small picture this time. I paint a lot of murals. In the last live broadcast, I did it on a big 4x4 board, but I want to make a lot of progress with the picture so that I'm able to produce more content and hopefully cover more information. So when I do a gradient, I put the paint on first. Notice that I didn't smear this around. When I start spreading it, it thins it out and it's going to dry faster. So I'm going to leave it piled up on there until I get the amounts of paint on there that I think are going to be what I need for my gradient. So I know that I want to blend from blue to white as it gets closer to the horizon. So here, it's okay if it mixes. I'm just dipping in this paint down here that's off camera. I've got a gallon of each of the colors, just like you've seen on my other videos, and I'm just dipping in it. And you can see that this white just encapsulates the blue. Forgive my shaky hand there. But it doesn't mix that much. Going from one color to the next, it doesn't mix that much. I get all the way to the bottom of a gallon, and the color's still fine. That's the nice part about working with these kinds of paints. This is the same thing you'd paint a wall with. and it's great for practice. It's not always the best for a real nice looking finish on a canvas, but very good for practice because it's fast and it's cheap. So I put white on, I put blue on, and now that I have the paint there that I want to use, I can start distributing it. Notice how I'm just talking away and the paint is staying wet. You know, I don't have to worry about it drying out because it's piled up. Then I just blend my gradient. I did the same method on a much larger scale on the how to paint underwater scenes video, where I was painting those dolphins underwater. So this was way more than I even needed, because, you know, if I put clouds in here, then they're going to cover a lot of this blue. But it's also nice because down here in we're in Gilbert, Arizona, just down to the south of the greater Phoenix area, and it's a lot more humid down here. This paint stays wet for longer. You know, if you're frustrated about dry time with water-based paints, you know, I think the first thing I would do is increase the humidity. If you have to put a humidifier in the room, if you have to wait till a rainy day. I always like working on exterior murals when it's kind of rainy outside because the humidity lets me work longer. Anyway, increase humidity and lower the temperature. I mean, just like water. Water evaporates fastest when it's hot and dry. I was always curious what would happen if I put a humidifier right by the picture, just constantly fogging it. It'd be a really cool stage effect. Fog coming down around the painting. All right, so here's a sky. And I'm thinking that I'm going to do, you know, like a forest line here. So let me think for a minute where I'm going to go with this. That's going to need to dry for a little bit before I can get nice bright whites for the clouds. You can see that it's still nice and wet. It's nice. So the next thing will be trees. So what can I do for trees? I love having good perspective in my picture. So I'm going to make sure that I have some perspective represented. You know, the instinctively, you might just make a horizon of trees that go straight across the picture. And I do that a lot if I'm just making flat ground. You know, I remember growing up in Ohio, that would be the end of a property, was where you saw the forest line. If you drove out of town, you'd have, you know, lots of cornfields, and it would just be a straight horizon. But I like to add perspective, so I'm going to make it like there's a tree line that's disappearing this way. So,
hey, Joe, Brian Peters in chat asked, what kind of paint are you using?
Yeah, yeah, it's a question that I can't answer often enough. This is acrylic latex wall paint. It's the same thing that the wall right here is. Let's see if I can see the screen there. Same kind of paint as that. I like to use low sheen, but not flat, because I like the way it works better. I use it because it's cheap and I can get gallons of it. Here, I'll lift this up so that you can see, you know, this is a gallon of blue. And so I'll go into a paint store and I'll say, I want your deep base, which is deep or the ultra deep. If it's in the case of Sherwin-Williams, they have their ultra deep. The deepest base. Deep refers to the amount of pigment that the paint is designed to hold. So the paint has the acrylic and the hardener and whatever amount of water is in there. And then in that, they put the colorant. So I ask for 11 or 12 ounces per gallon, unless it's a factory color like this. So in the case of this yellow, Sherwin-Williams just has it on the shelf. I just grab it and go. And it's a satin sheen. Its duration is the line of paint, and Sherwin-Williams makes it. It's their interior duration. Designed to paint walls, not murals. But it just so happens to work really well. And I do it for things like this that I'm not investing a lot. And I just want to get the picture painted and have some fun. So it's great for doing this kind of work. All right, so we'll say there's some trees right here. And maybe these are, some of them are green, but then let's say that some of them are on the red side. So let's get some red. Now when I mix red with this green, it's going to get really brown. So that's going to be a trick, you know. Maybe I need to watch this. This is a good way to make dirt. Okay. You have your green. This will be fun. I added blue because I want to get a darker blue or green. So up here at the top, I have my yellow blue mix. This is the green. Down here, I have a darker green. And as I bring this down, as soon as this green mixes with red, it starts making brown. It makes this dark result that's darker than the red or the green I started with, and just so happens to be really nice for natural looking shadows. So I can just very loosely bring the colors up in there and make them look like the shadows of trees. And then immediately I have a dirt bank that's slipping right up under the trees. And I'll just add white where the light is striking that bank. So then I take white like this. Just and very quickly makes the look of a dirt bank that's shadowed by those trees. So all I did was take my green down and added a little bit of red at the base and then white to make the light on it. Here. What else should we put in this? Let's put some distant stuff. So maybe back in here we'll have some hills or something where it's all disappearing. So if I'm imagining some green trees like this, but really far, and I'm going to make them darker. Ultimately, when I'm done with the picture, I don't want them to have this real bright green look. So I'm thinking of a more foresty green, but I'm going to let it mix with the sky color because it's got sky in between me and that background. So I've heard that referred to as atmospheric haze. I'll put a little bit of red into it. I always do this. When you mix blue with anything, it gets greener than it would in nature, because in nature, light side by side is not like mixing paint where it's piling it on, you know, they're all piling on top of each other. It filters itself when you mix paint. But in nature, if you just have light on top of light, you just have light together, then you don't get the greener result. So I'm adding red to make sure that I don't have too green of a result when I put the blue in. And that was too much red. Right? So making a green. Green for the forest, a little red to make it not too green in my background. And then when I add white to lighten it again, then I'll have a really nice background color for like a distant forest. Yeah. Send this white. Maybe I'll change that later, you know, depending on what colors I decide to make all my trees and everything. Let's go a little more blue. Ultimately, you just want it to look like, however you get there, you want it to look like a percentage of the sky color and a percentage of the object. It's just that simple. The more I study colors in nature, the more I realize that it is very consistent. And once you identify certain rules, you can really rely on them. And I mean, to the point of being able to turn it into a calculator. You know, you could just say this color plus this color, just understanding where the colors are coming from, adding them together and understanding what the sum of them will look like. So I have this background and I'm going to make the little tops of these trees smaller. This is further away, so I better not make large shapes. I want to stick with smaller shapes here. So let's smooth this out a little bit. Now we have a more distant bank right there. That's kind of fun. There we go. All right, now while I'm letting this dry up, this is just a base. You know, when I'm in creative mode, I just have my primaries, throw them on the canvas, and just try to go with what's happening. You know, I see if there's something happening that I like. I'm not trying to be real exact with details. I'm just giving myself something to look at, because what I'm able to generate looking at the picture will be better than what I can just think of from scratch out of my mind. Now this is getting dry enough that I can put some clouds up in here, so that'll be fun. I always keep a water bucket handy, and I'm gonna put that up here so you can see. Nice and big. You know, I don't like to aim when I'm trying to put the brush in the water. And I rinse it, and I just spin it like I'm trying to make a fire. Then I dab it on my towel. I always have this towel handy. You know, whenever I'm painting with this water-based paint, I keep a towel handy so I can just do this like I'm sharpening a knife. And then I keep a wet one handy too, just in case. All right, so let's paint some clouds. Here's another thing that I posted videos on a long time ago, and I'm really feeling like I need to do a good update on how to paint clouds. I try to, you know, include everything I've learned, but then a day later I learned something new, and I'm like, snap, should have put that in the video. That's the way it goes. I'm a student just as much as I am a teacher. All right, so let's make a cloud right here. This one will be in the foreground. And I'm just putting it here because I had all that white right there. On the edge of a picture is a great place to put a foreground object so that the perspective looks nice and sharp. Bring that up off the picture there. So what color do I use for the shadow? Clouds have to have shadows. If you want them to look natural, they've got to have shadows. Unless they're just the really thin, wispy ones that, you know, where the light just strikes through them and they're just totally washed out with white light. But you know, this kind of cloud's always going to have a shadow to it. And to make that shadow, I'm just going to use the sky color to start with. And that's too much, so I'm going to put it down here on the canvas for later use. Put a shadow here. Now, when you make a shadow on an object, the shadow always has a shape. And even though it's real soft and just blurs out, it's still within a boundary area, kind of like if you took an oval and then you just hit the blur button on your art program and it turns it into a different look, but it still has a shape to it. So an oval shape is going to suggest that that cloud is a three-dimensional object. So I'm going to make sure that I don't just do a flat, skinny shadow. Now that blue looks pretty good for the shadow color, but it can look better if I add just a tiny bit of red. So red and blue do make a purple color, but not nearly as purple as if I used a raw pigment that was violet, or if I used a magenta plus a blue. If I add red to blue, then it's going to make a violet color, and I'm only putting a tiny bit in here. That is very gray in comparison with the blue and the red that it came from. So you can see it's getting more violet, just a little bit. And now next to this blue sky, it's a very gray looking shadow, even though it is a shade of violet. So I'll just start using some real loose technique and dragging this color down. I'll let that come all the way out off the edge of the cloud. The very edge of the cloud is going to have the shadow color on it. Hey, while we're at it, let's put a few more clouds in here. It'll be fun. That's kind of a cool shape right there. A little bit right here. Kind of dry brushing, something I don't do a lot of. There. All right, then I've got some pure white. I can just throw a little bit of white in the middle for a highlight on this guy. A little bit of white on this one. Now, I want to keep the shadow very slightly around the edges. And a cloud is a shape that is made of many clouds. So think of many clouds coming together to make a larger cloud. So I don't just want to have shadow around the outside of my larger shape. I want to have a little bit of shadow around every individual shape within that cloud that I decide to make it from. The quick and easy way to apply that is to just put patches of white that blend outward. So I'll put a bit of white on here, and I'm just going to kind of blend it outward toward an edge. Now, I'll put another one here and see where it's kind of coming outward, I blend it this way, but I don't blend it toward the middle so much. I'm losing track of where I'm at here. Let's put some more white on there.
So David asked, why red? Where in nature would red come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So red is everywhere. Every time you see the color white, it's not the color. It's all of the colors that your eyes are able to see at the same time. So white is a result. So you use red to simulate other colors. It's just in the mix. So I wouldn't call this red. I would call this like a very slightly bluish, purplish gray. But to make that, it has red light in it. And if you look at your computer screen, almost every pixel on that screen has all three of the LCDs lit to different percentages in order to synthesize the colors that you would see in nature. It's not the best synthesis on your computer screen because it's using only 3 colors to generate all of the frequencies that your eye can see in nature. So that light that you see out there is softer and nicer to look at, probably because it's more like a white noise rather than, you know, just a couple noises being scrambled together, making a more obnoxious sound. And I don't want to get too abstract, but red is in all kinds of colors, and so you'll use it just as something to mix. The red mixed with the blue is what is left over after a lot of the green light is filtered out by the cloud, to give you a more scientific explanation. So what's left behind in the shadow is a lot of the green has been removed because of the filtering of the water drops. So I put a little bit of red to get that cloud shadow color. You can very easily go too far and put too much. So trial and error. All right, I'm putting a little more white. I got real heavy on the paint, and so now I'm just going to kind of leave it loose like that, because white is not a very powerful pigment. And so when you start with shadow colors and add white, it can be really hard to get enough of it on there without the darker colors overpowering it. Now I've got a little bit of space left here. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. You know, we'll just throw some blue for now. Maybe I'll put a colorful tree over it later.
Brian asks, you always use the bottom of your canvases to mix your colors?
Yep. I do. Yeah, under every Mural Joe painting is this, and you know it ends up being like a shade of gray by the time I mix it all together. It's kind of like priming the canvas ahead of time. You know, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And you know, I just spread it out real thin as I go because I know it dries real fast, and I'm going to be able to just cover it right up. So now let's say we have some water in this picture. Let's do water. I could go on for days about water. So let's stick with the vital elements that will make it look like water right away. And you get those things first and then build the smaller, less key components on top of that. The first thing that I stress with water is have good perspective. So when you have a body of water, if you want it to look like it's this way and not this way, then you want to have really good perspective. So I'm going to put a body of water. Everything in the background is going to stay very horizontal. As things get further away, they just get smashed this way. You know, everything that's further away from you than, let's say, further away than like 100 yards is going to be right along the center strip of your view. So there's so much detail right along that skinny strip of your vision that you in real life, it looks like so much information. It's so much of your world. You're not always looking at just that 100 yards in front of you, you know, but you look up there and you're so attuned to all that detail. In a painting, we often, we short the painting and we leave that out. We don't nail that little bit of perspective. That's such an important aspect, is that skinny strip. So I want to make sure I don't.
And Valerie was asking, can you give some advice for beginners on how to paint landscape? But I mean, that's probably.
Well, again, you know, the most important thing, beginners on how to paint a landscape, is look for, these days there's tons of instruction all over YouTube. But there are certain things that are foundational and key components. Understand perspective first and foremost. That is the most important thing, because all of the nice colors and fancy shapes are not going to fix wrong looking perspective. So you want to really have that dialed in. So I'm making sure as I do this, I'm just throwing colors on here and I'm not worrying a lot about shapes and things, but because I understand what's happening with the perspective, this is going to look like a scene. And that's number one. So then understand what the sky is going to do to the picture, because in landscapes, the sky is in almost every picture. So this, what I explained earlier in this video, this tree line is a percentage of the sky and a percentage of the object color. It's just a mix. And so I just put the color that I think is somewhere in between. And the further away it is, the more it becomes the color of the sky. The closer it is, the more it becomes the color of the object point blank. You really want to have those colors dialed in to represent atmosphere. Very important in landscapes.
What's your favorite object to paint?
Monsters.
Toby Brat is asking you. So.
Dragons.
Dragons?
Yeah, like in that new video, that sea monster and the way, it's just, I just have the most fun. But, when someone's hiring you to paint a children's room, they don't often want you to paint.
Like my son's room?
Yeah, like they don't often want big, scary things. Yeah. All right, so I'm spending too much time messing with this bank in the background. I said I was going to do water. So this is what happens. Reflection is the most like the source in the background. The further away, so the more the angle becomes completely flat, just like the mirages on the road. You drive in the summer sun and you see on the horizon the mirages of the cars, you see the reflection. The same thing on the pavement. You see the most reflection as it gets to that perfect 90-degree angle. And so water is a lot more reflective than pavement. So as it tilts toward you, you still see reflection, but it's less and less and less as it comes this way. So in the background, that is where the angle is the most like this 90-degree to the direction I'm looking. So that's where I want to have the most reflection. And then as I come down in the picture, I'm going to put more of whatever is under the water. So when I do water, two basic elements: underwater color and reflection color. And I'm going to do a gradient between those. I've got my reflection color, my underwater color, blend them together. And it's that simple. So what's under this water? I'm just going to say mud. And so we'll make it just kind of a bluish brown. Right? But I think it's going to be easier to go, well, we'll do that because I'm going to change the color. I'm going to add some bright colors and make some fall leaves in there. So down here in the very foreground, now maybe this picture, this is where you decide, when you're painting a landscape, you decide what you want the perspective to be. Are you standing? Can you see the bank right by your feet? Can you look down and see something that's only a couple feet away from you? Or are you zoomed in on a distant shot? And what's at the bottom of the picture? If I'm going to hang this little picture on the wall and have people look at it from 10 feet away, I probably don't want to stage it like you're right in the picture looking straight down, because that perspective is only going to look right when it's life size. Still looks good. Pictures that are blown out and fisheyed because of the lens distortion, they still look fine. But if you want it to look the most natural, it can be good strategy to consider if it was actual size. How much would you see? Would you be able to look down and see something at your feet? So I'm not going to make it like I'm looking straight down at my feet. I'm going to have this already starting at some sky color. So basically, yellow, red, and blue will make brown. Okay, so if this is green because it's not enough red. All right, so let me get rid of this yellow and show you what I mean. If I put red in this, it's going to be brown. I'm going to make a brown color. So now I'm going to start adding blue so that it's becoming more and more like the sky. But look, it goes from this brownish color. When I add the blue, I'm getting a very green result, especially if I use this particular blue that's from Sherwin-Williams. And I don't know if I really want that really green shade of in my water. So that's why I added red, because red kills green. It's opposite to it. And when you mix them, they mute each other a lot. They filter each other's light away and become they cancel both colors. So if I add red to this, it gets rid of the green tone. So anytime you're adding blue to something, you'll often add red also to keep it from becoming too green. And then I won't need as much of the green as I get further up here. Or I think I said that wrong. I won't need as much of the red as I get further up here. So see how I'm getting more and more toward the sky color. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that looks nothing like the sky color. It's totally dark. Yeah, because I'm concerned first with the red, yellow, and blue balance. And then I'll add my white. And here, see. I never want it to reach the 100% value of the sky. I want it to look like it's a reflection. It's not the source. So I'm going to keep it being just closer and closer as it gets further away. So that's add a little more blue and white. Let's see if we can get a good reflection color there. Good sky coloring.
Do you ever paint expressionist stuff?
Expressionist?
Yep, that's what David Orrin would like to know.
That's a good question. I think that all paintings are only an impression of the real thing, regardless of how much detail you're able to put in it to make a person believe that they're looking at the source of the picture. It's still synthesized. You're taking colors to create the illusion of an object that's really just paint on a canvas. So to me, I try to look at things very, very literally so that I can learn and observe and understand what's happening. And to me, everything is impressionism. So I've heard it said many times, that my work is realism. I don't call it that. I let people call it whatever they choose, but to me, it's just an impression. So the question, do you ever do impressionism? I feel like it's all I do. I'm just determining the pixel size of my picture. Pixel is a brushstroke. We'll call that a pixel. I don't really have any details in here that are smaller than that. So then it becomes impressionistic in a sense, because if you were looking at the real thing, you would see so much more detail. So even my most real-looking paintings, I still think of those as just an impression of what God's already made,
So now, as far as this water, are you worried about painting the rocks or the transparency of the water?
Oh, okay. So this is what this is what I'm demonstrating, is that this creates the look right here, this gradient. Underwater color, brown, and it has a little bit of green in there where I transition to the blue, but it kind of looks like algae and swampy water. I'm just going to leave that. And then it gets bluer and bluer as it comes up, more like the sky, but it still has enough of the brown to dirty this color up and make it gray. Now it's time to put the reflections in this water. This is how I get the look of transparency, is by making sure that you see more and more of the underwater color. See, I don't refer to it as the brown or the blue or whatever's in it, because that could be any color that's out there. But I refer to it as the underwater color because it's different in every painting. And anywhere I see more of that color is going to represent where the water is making a wave that's showing me like a window into the deep water, and where it tilts away, it becomes more like the sky color. So that's how I get that look. Now, if I add reflections, this is going to immediately start looking like real glassy water, just because I have this base layer. This is the most important thing that you want to have in the water before you do anything else. is that gradient established. So before I do more reflection on this, I might as well just do it now. Here, change my mind. Might as well just do it now with this color. So I'll put the green of these trees here. And this reflection also is going to be mixed with a percentage of what is under the water. So, you know, it's just like doing math. I'm always going to be mindful of what the different elements of the picture are. In this one, I have underwater color. If the reflection wasn't there, I would be seeing this color. I'd be seeing this brown. But it's reflecting color from this, lights bouncing off that surface and adding to it. So I have the sum of those colors. So I'm going to make a color that looks like a cross between this color and the brown. Just like here, I have a cross between the sky and the brown. So it's going to end up in a darker green that's browner. So I'll add a little bit of red. There we go. Some red right here. And I think that confidence really matters a lot. You know, once you know that these rules are true, then you put the information together with confidence, just like doing math.
How much do you plan out your paintings?
Well, I planned in this one, you know, I planned, well, I'm gonna do some colored fall leaves, which I haven't done. So that shows how much I follow my plan. But I planned them enough to.
How do we get some more fall into that painting?
I'd like to know that too. Let's see.
If I'm gonna hang this on my wall.
Yay. All right. And look, whenever I do reflection of something, if I want to add texture to this water, I can just add some little strips. They get less and less as it comes down. Because these are where, in the foreground, if there's waves, it's tipping back to produce more of that angle that reflects to your eyes, but it's happening up here because the wave is tilting it back. So the back side of every wave is going to have something that's closer to the horizon on it than the front side of the wave. So back here, I'll make the image just starting to zigzag and break up. As it gets closer, I have less and less. And it's very subtle. You can hardly see that because it's not much of a difference in color. I can mess with that a little more later, but just to show that that's how it works. Yeah, fall. Let's put some fall into this paint. Now this is dry, so I can put some nice bright colors on there. I think I'm going to use a smaller brush. This will be good. So let's do a red tree. So I explained recently, I did a post on the Facebook page that had this chart that shows how the hue shifts as it gets brighter, especially with things that are very, very transparent where the light can shine through them. So with leaves, the light shines right through them and you see a lot of glow in those leaves. When that happens, it always gets, it always bends one direction on the spectrum. You can look at that chart on my Facebook post to see what I'm talking about. But in the case of a red tree, it's going to get more orange than yellow, and then at its very brightest, it'll go from yellow to white. It won't get to green. It's just going to go from the yellow to the white. So if I want to put a red tree in here, I want to make the shadows of that red tree the most red. Now, the amount of gray is up for grabs. That you know, you decide how bright it is. So let me put a little bit of violet, put a little bit of blue, just like I did with the cloud. It'll dirty up this red. And if the shadows are a little more of that purple color, and I'm going to add a little white because it's a very dark looking tree right now. Okay, so let's lighten this up. So I'm just doing this shape to it so that it looks like there's maybe a green tree right in front of it now. Right here. And then you can see this is real bright. You know, I don't know if that's going to be enough for the shadow color. I think it'll be pretty good. And then as it gets brighter, it's going to go in the order of that spectrum that I posted on the chart. Violet gets brighter, it turns red. Gets brighter, it turns more yellow. So if I get brighter, I need to go toward the yellow side of the rainbow. So red. Now I'm in the pure red. This doesn't have any blue mixed in. And I'm also going to add white, because if it gets brighter, it gets redder. If it gets redder, it gets brighter. They go hand in hand. So I'm adding white and red right now. So this is maybe one of those red maples that we're seeing a lot of this time of year. There's one thing I loved about growing up in Ohio was those colorful falls. Okay, I'm going to add some more white until this looks like it is a good deal brighter than those shadows, as well as more red. And then if I want to get even brighter than that, I just need to make sure that I keep shifting the color toward the yellow. Notice that I said toward the yellow, not to yellow, right? So I don't just instantly put yellow on for the bright areas. It's just going in that direction. Sometimes if the effect is very subtle, because it's not a very transparent object, it only makes it from the violet to a little bit more red. But if it's very transparent, there's bright light, you're going to see more of the yellow. It just depends how extreme the effect is. In the sunset, it's water, which is very transparent. So you get all the way from deep violets all the way to a bright yellow and then washed out white. So here on this tree, you see I just added a little bit of yellow here. So now I'm going to take some white, put it in there, and I'm just going to make some bright little tips on this tree. And because I put that yellow, I know that this is going to look like a tree with light shining on it. I don't have to guess. You know, I'm all about taking the guesswork out. What causes the look? What do I have to do to know that I can make that look when I want to? All right, let's do that. And so maybe we make an orange tree now. So I'll start with an orange color down here. So let's do red and yellow. Yeah, there you go. You're seeing that good. Sorry, maybe I made this kind of small.
How do you know where you're going to David asks, how do you know where to start your tree reflection base in the water?
Visualize it as a three-dimensional reflection. So where the land meets the water is the edge of the symmetrical shape. So I take my hands like this. This is the land. This is the reflection. It's like this. Okay, so if I'm looking down at that, I'm going to see a lot less of the reflection, you know, if it's tilted like this. But if it's in the distance, I'm going to see more of a perfectly symmetrical reflection. That's why when you see reflections of mountains, which you have to be, you know, miles away from to get the whole mountain in the picture, then you see a pretty much completely symmetrical reflection. But when someone takes a snapshot of a flowing stream and the stones are down by their feet, then a lot of times that reflection will be underneath the object. So think of the reflection as being in that upside down world under the water. So then back to this tree, you know, I'll put a few orange trees in here. No, they're not growing oranges, they're just orange in color. We have a lot of orange trees here in Arizona. All right. Okay, so then I'm just going to add white. Watch. Add a little bit of white here. And this is going to look okay. Just adding white is okay. But it's not the best. Not to me. White is the color I add to all the leaves that I want to look like they have the reflection of the sky on. You know, I just add white, regardless of the hue. You know, if I just want it to look like that generally white light from the sky, it should not direct sunlight as much. Okay.
Brian was just asking, did you switch brushes when you started doing this?
Yeah, I did. I used a smaller brush. Yeah, maybe I should use the bigger one. I don't know. But right here, I'm using this smaller. But all of my brushes have this in common. They have a tip that I can sharpen to a blade shape. I don't use anything else. I don't like to use round brushes or fan brushes or anything. I just like to use on my bigger brushes like this one. You know, I can get a nice sharp blade so I can do skinny lines or fat lines like a calligraphy pen. And these little ones are the same shape, just smaller bristles, smaller brush, same techniques. So on a bigger mural, I'm just using bigger brushes. I can transfer all of my techniques to small or big brushes because I always use this same shape. It's just what I've grown familiar with and am comfortable with. I'm not saying that it's the best way to do it. Okay, so now I've got the white, and that looks okay, but it's going to look better if I have yellow in that white because of the hue shift. And then it's going to look more like a more orange colored tree next to this red tree. So now I'm adding yellow to only the brighter areas. It gets yellower. So this hue shift that I'm referring to, it happens, everything that's on the red side of violet is going to shift toward the red and the yellow. It's going to go in that order, but everything toward the green side of a violet is going to go the violet, then to a bluer, greener color, then to the green, then the yellow. It goes different directions. And you can see that illustrated on that chart on my Facebook page. I don't want to kill too much time talking about the same old thing. All right, so now I'm adding the bright white to the very tips of these. Now this tree looks a lot more illuminated. You know, it looks more natural, like the sun's shining on it, and it's more of a fiery orange color. And this one looks more like the redder tree of the two. Blend out some of that white that's there. So this one stops when it gets to an orange. This one stops when it gets to a yellow. And then if I did a yellow tree, let's do a yellow tree. Yellow is not going to go to anything but white. So I'll do a yellow tree in here. Let's do like one of those big towering birch trees that comes up. So if I put a shadow to yellow, then I want to work backwards. I want to make the shadow have a little bit of red in it. So my brush already has some red in it, so I think it'll be okay. We'll just add a little bit of black. All right, and you're going to see this is going to be a real green shadow when I add this. And here, I know this is small. Yeah. We'll do some stuff in the foreground too. So I need to add red so that it's not so green. And here. There we go. Now I have a good shadow color for my yellow tree. I'm going to try to get rid of that pure red that's in there. Now back to the yellow. This is a yellow tree, so we'll put the yellow coming up out of this like so, and it's coming to a little point here. Then we'll make a couple more of them, just a little one standing back here. Like that. And then pure white for the highlights. So the sun's hitting this tree.
Rosetta wonders how long you've actually been drawing for.
All my life. All my life. You know, I don't see myself as having any kind of exceptional ability to understand. I know this sounds stupid to a lot of you, but I don't see myself as having any exceptional understanding. Just so much interest in the subject that I spent all my waking moments as a child studying and being excited about things that you wouldn't be excited about. I saw a shape on a wall and just stared at it and thought of what it might be in a picture, and I would draw it. And I went through phases of drawing anatomy and then drawing different animals, sharks, and then horses and bodybuilders, and learning the muscles of people. I always had these phases where I just loved it. I just loved learning about the shapes. I started with drawing, moved to painting later, because drawing developed such an understanding of shape. And, you know, it's when you're a child, it's hard to break out the gallons of paint when you go to town. All right, so in here, I'm going to put a foreground object. I think this will be fun. So let's start with, let's put a big old kind of purple colored tree here. Now, if I had my magenta is the real purple kind of red that you can just buy it, the tint from a store, but I don't have it in my collection right now. So I'm just going to use this dirtier purple that I can make with red and blue. But I can make a much more brilliant purple if I had that magenta. All right, so I'm adding blue, getting a purple color, and this is going to be a big tree hanging over. Now, I'm not too worried about details and shapes, but I do have this technique that I love to use with these kinds of brushes where I point the longest end of the brush at the picture. And so this is the longest end, and I use that all the time to create lots of different shapes. So I have it dipped in, and you can see that triangle shape where I dipped the point. And if I just put it right on, it's going to make a dot. And if I drag it sideways, it's going to make a diamond kind of shape. If I do this way, it's going to make a stripe. So you see, I can make a lot of diversity in my shapes by using the brush like this. And I just like the feel of that. So that's what I end up using. Now, I don't want this shadow to be this dark because these are leaves and a lot of light shines through them. But as you get closer and closer to the middle of the tree, you have less and less light, and specifically less direct light shining right from the sun. You have more light bouncing off the blue sky and shining in. So I'm going to make this have less of the brilliant colors, but I'm not going to make it too dark. So I'm going to add white. You want really a grayer tone toward the middle of a tree to make it look like a canopy. Grayer than the rest of the tree. As you get toward the outside, you get both brighter and more saturated with these colors. So we'll do this. Now you can see that that's real kind of purple looking in there. That's a pretty good shadow color. And it doesn't look like much right now because I don't have the bright colors extending out from that. So here it's going to get more red. As the light shines on it, I'm going to put more red on there and more white. So here's, maybe where there's some leaves shooting out into the sunlight. And then I'll just do less and less of them and make it blend down into this shadow color. Maybe another one here. This is, I already did that spot, so I need to do one there. Red here. I could have done the bright red first and then worked backwards to the shadow by the same rules, Like this. And how about a little bit right here? These bunches on trees, they tend to extend out like fingers. They have all of these branches. They have a long shape that extends out. So I'm trying to make that look right now.
So someone just asked, you paid so much time to the clouds and now you just paint a tree above it? Does that make you sad sometimes when you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't a great looking cloud though. Yeah. It does. Sometimes I'll have a bigger picture and it has something that I spent a lot more time on. And then I realized that it's just going to be better for the picture altogether if I put this object right here, and it's just the best option, but then I have to cover up something. Yeah, it makes me kind of sad. That's where planning can be advantageous because doing things twice is not economical. Yeah, that's a lesson to live by right there. Why paint a big fancy background, just to paint over it? If you're doing a little picture, it's fun. You're learning. You're in the craft. It's cool. But if it's a job that you're doing for a customer and you paint a big fancy background, it's not good when you have to paint right over it, especially not if they liked it. And you just wasted all that time, So now I have the look of a tree that's got the deeper foliage in the middle where that darker, more violet color is. And then out here where it gets in the sun, it has the much brighter, redder color. And what would be fun? You know what we should do? I'll tell you what we should do. Is demonstrate how this works with blue. Because, you just wouldn't see a blue tree. But in my picture, there's going to be a blue tree. So watch this. This is just to prove that getting the right color is not the issue. It's getting the right relationship between the colors, right? So this blue needs to get greener as it gets brighter. Now we're going the other way on the spectrum, you know, and so this is blue goes to like at its darkest might be a little bit of a violet blue, and then it's going to go more toward the turquoise, then to the green, just like an ocean wave, just like my How to Paint Waves video. And then if it got really bright, closer to yellow, but the blue is not going to get all the way to a yellow probably. So we go right here. Blue leaves.
Someone said it's fun to watch the painting evolve and know it's okay to change it.
Oh yeah, because you know, I appreciate that, because that is the story of my life. I mean, as I was learning, you know, when this became my way to pay my bills, it got really important real fast to get good and to be able to paint what I needed to paint. So if I accidentally achieved something, that was very frustrating. I'd be like, I'm just going to do it over, because I don't, you know, what I want to know is, can I do it again? And it was very frustrating to not know how it happened. So getting a good looking picture was never enough for me. I had to have control. It's the control freak in me, you know. I need to know that I can do it when I want to do it, so that I can produce whatever I'm imagining. So I'm getting greener as it's getting brighter, but I haven't added the brightness yet. I've just added the green. So now it's time to add brighter colors. So out here, it's in the sun, you know, we have these turquoise leaves. Of course, why wouldn't you? And it's getting darker and darker and bluer as it gets darker. Maybe there's a few catching the light up in here. Just kind of gray. See, and here's my most brilliant turquoise colors out here, even though my brush is real dirty and it's kind of making them gray. See, now I have this weird looking blue tree. And this blue is kind of nice in the shadows of this red. I can still add more to make more violet shadows if I want more contrast. I often come back and adjust things if I, you know, once I feel like I've, you know, first apply the rules that I'm familiar with, but then I do it by feel too. You know, I think, oh, it just looks like it could use a little more natural. All right, that's how you apply that rule of that shifting color. Now it's time to make a reflection. So down here, this reflection is going to look much different. So let's first get this color back in the water. Here, put this. All right, I'm going to do my best at just quickly matching the color that's there, and then bringing it down to the underwater color, which is a brown. Got a phone ringing over there. That always happens to me in the middle of videos. My phone buzzes. Have to hit pause.
Someone was asking about, as far as pricing your work, how do you?
Oh man, that's a touchy subject. I get that question a lot, and I'm always cautious to answer it because I was never very good at making money. So, you know, I priced things real cheap in order to get jobs. You know, and now that I have a good name for myself, I can charge more. I can charge more, but I just don't feel like I'm an expert on the issue. But you know, if you're painting on someone's wall, you're not giving them a collectible piece. This is not like doing a picture in a gallery that's going to be bought and sold and collectible for years. And so it's going to be, I'm not trying to say for that reason it's cheaper in value, but it will be perceived generally as less value than the kind of art that's collectible. And so it's going to be comparable to contracting. So the first thing I would do is check out what local paint contractors are charging in the area if you're doing mural work like I do. And then mark it up from there, because you're very specialized. You're a specialty expert field. And so I would mark it up from there. I don't recommend starting low and getting bites from customers and then working your way up. I recommend starting high, and then when you get hungrier and hungrier, start bringing the price down, because I don't want to be responsible for underpricing anyone's work. I hope you make tons more money than I ever did, but I am not going to say a number. You should charge this. It depends so much on your area and what people have been. What do you do when you're selling a house? You see what the houses in the area have sold for. That's my best advice. It's probably wrong. Okay, I just spent way too long doing this here. Let me put this on. All right, now we want a reflection. So you remember what I said. This is like an upside down image. So these extending out this way, I'm going to see the reflection in here, but it's going to look different. It's not just a mirror image. So it's going to extend out, and I'm seeing the underside of this tree now. So this is going to be a very dark reflection. So what I see here is light bouncing off maybe the tops and maybe through the leaves, but here it's going to be darker for two reasons: because it's reflecting on top of this dark brown color, and because I'm seeing the underside. I'm seeing the tree this way right here, and I'm seeing it this way down here. So when I add red to this, it's going to get real dark. So this is the reflection here in my water. But notice that even this dark reflection, I'm going to allow to get real faded and disappear as it gets closer in the picture. So down here, I don't have a lot of it. Up here, I have a lot more of it, more vivid dark reflection. And yeah, that's just an impression of the red and the blue. Just putting it in there. All right, then we need reflection of these, and that brush is way dirty with dark colors, so we'll use this one. So here, I'll do my red, right? I had a, okay, this is a cool thing, right? You can see the underside of this. I just had a good thought. Yeah. You have the underside of this tree, top side right here. Even though you can't see the red tree back there, that doesn't mean you're not going to see it in the reflection, because remember, this is like our 3D world upside down, and I can see this reflection. So I'm going to put my red tree in there. Now, of course, I don't need to for the sake of the picture. Nobody even would know there's a red tree back there, except that I'm showing them that there's a red tree now in the reflection. So let's darken this color. The reflection is going to be darker than the source. Right here, and we're going to add a little bit of yellow to the highlights. We're just painting that tree upside down right here. Then we'll move over here and paint these orange ones. Look how dirty this color is. A little bit less. Reflection here. Reflection here. And look, I'm going to kind of zigzag. I'm going to use a lot of horizontal strokes because that's going to look like little ripples in the water. Oh yeah, here's our yellow tree. Right. Maybe there's, just little waves barely catching that reflection back here. All right, we got the reflection of these guys here. And a tiny bit of white will look nice on there. Like this.
The Jilly Killy asked, please do an in-depth video on mixing colors. My colors never turn out to be the one I want. Any tips?
Yeah.
On your Learn site, you have a whole 6-part video on mixing colors.
I actually don't have a very good video on just mixing colors. I touch on that in the midst of all the different videos I do. And I'm glad you said that, because I do need to make a much more comprehensive video on the mixing of colors.
I guess it's a color theory series that you did.
Yeah, and that's on YouTube. If you look up color theory and paint, Mural Joe, then that's there. But I totally understand. It's not the greatest video. I made it a long time ago, and I kind of sped through a lot of details, and I've discovered a lot of other helpful tips since then. Yeah, I need to do more with that. All right, so here's our colorful trees, and then we got our green trees, and you know what this needs? It needs to have the same rule applied to the greens. So I'm going to do that to make this look like more of a complete picture. So this green here needs to be yellower. Here, let's use this spot that I haven't used yet. All right, so let's put some.
Michael Wall asked, do you have traditional drawing skills, and do you paint the figure at all?
Okay, wait, so you say that for me one more time about traditional drawing skills.
Yeah, traditional drawing skills, which is obviously yes.
Yeah, right. That's like a question earlier, you know, about how long I've been doing this. And yeah, I started drawing at a very young age. My mom has my first drawings from 3 years old, and then there was just a bazillion of them that got thrown in the trash. Not by them, but you know, because my parents would never ever throw any of my artwork away, just like I would never throw any of my kids' millions of drawings away, because good parents don't do that, right? No, I'm just saying that. I feel terrible because I have thrown away so many drawings. Then I think of moments like this where it's like, man, what would I give to have all of those childhood drawings back? I used to sell Ninja Turtle drawings. And then I got in trouble because kids were using their lunch money to buy them. So I had to stop doing that. I drew because, you know, I'm a lover of shapes, and it was learning how to use lines and shapes, and that's really valuable in painting, is understanding the lines and shapes, even though you're using so much color. If you first understand the shapes, well, then you have good areas to put the color in, having those shapes defined. All right, so down here we can put these brighter colors too. See, I'm following the same rule with these colors. The green getting yellower as it gets brighter, the red getting yellower as it gets brighter. Let's put these. Now here I'm just going to use horizontal lines so that it just, you know, a quick cheater technique of making this look like water reflection. Someone said on one of my favorite comments still is, you must be using cheat codes or something on the how to paint underwater scenes. Or no, how to paint sea floor. Yeah, the YouTube video. Must be using cheat codes or something. I feel like I am using cheat codes. You know, it's funny when you discover the reason something works and what makes it work, and then you systematically apply it, and then it works, and go figure. There's actually an exact solution to the problem. That's the way all of the art that I've ever done feels, is that there is a logical, reasonable explanation why you hate the way your painting looks, or why you love the way it looks. You know, there's always an explanation. All right, so you can't see this green bunch up here, but in the reflection you can. So I can put that there. So maybe now I put like a rock bank shooting out right here. That'll be fun. Yeah, let's put a rock.
So you got a big hello from Brazil.
Yeah, yeah.
One from India, one from Chile.
Cool.
But Carlos from Brazil is asking, have you worked with oil inks? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, with oil paints.
Mm-hmm.
Oil paints. You know, I'm going to be working a lot more with oil paints. I have a lot in the past because, you know, traditionally they are able to blend more and achieve finer detail, I think, more easily than the water-based. I think that my paintings would actually look nicer if they were done in oil. It's just that this is so much quicker and good for practicing. I used it at a younger age, not to do pieces for money, but I'm wanting more and more to do oil pieces now. And I am going to, this is the first time I've said this on a video, but I'm going to be painting about 35 pieces with artist oils that are going to hang in a gallery here in Flagstaff. And I'll be announcing the release of that showing as it gets closer. So I'm wanting to show that the techniques that I teach work with all different mediums, because it's just rules about color placement and shapes. I bet you wonder what I'm painting right now. This is not looking very beautiful. So I'd be in my garage doing an oil painting, and then, I'd be halfway done and I'd totally lose interest and just ditch it, because that was before I had a reason to do the art. So let's say this is kind of a rock shooting out into the water right here. So it's going to need a reflection, first of all. So let's put a reflection in there. And the reflection is going to be very subtle. So I want to make sure I put a lot of my bluish, greenish, brownish, whatever color here. So let's put a reflection under it. And remember, if I'm looking down at this, I don't have nearly as much of this symmetrical look. This is closer now. So I want to have a lot of my underwater color here. So add brown. Orange and black make brown.
Give you a few more shout outs from Costa Rica, Argentina, Scottsdale, DC, Germany.
Hey, cool. Who's from Germany?
Murczel, so I don't know if that's just one word. So
I would say that if I could. Yep. I love Germany because me and my wife have been there. I love it. I want to go everywhere in the world. I love to travel. But right now we have a 6-month-old baby at home, and it's a hard thing to do. But I did go over to Frankfurt and visit our friend Franco over there, and there's a lot of really beautiful things. I love the overcast weather. I love overcast. We're in Arizona where we have no shortage of sun, and man, it stresses me out.
That's the opposite of like Seattle.
Oh, yeah, there's so much sun. Oh my gosh. All right, so I made my subtle reflection in that water. Notice how I made it so brown, because all it is, again, a percentage of the underwater color, whatever you decide that is. I mean, it could be bright pink, and the object color. And it's, again, it's like the image flipped upside down. So I made this shorter so that I have good perspective. So now I get questions about rocks a lot. So this is how I visualize rocks. I imagine, it's easy to imagine geometric shapes. So I imagine this just being a perfect oval maybe. And then what happens if I start cutting off sides of that? So this is just the way I generate the shape in my mind of a rock. I think of it as something real easy to come up with, like a circle or an oval. And then I think of 3 different sizes, like small, medium, and large cuts, so that I get a nice random feel. So right here, I'm making a real big slice off of this rock just by putting a straight line of a highlight color right across the top of it. It's like slicing the top off of that. And then I'm going to do this in a few other places, but I want to make sure that I do different sizes. So down here, I'll just do a smaller one. And then I have like it's going this way, then down, then this way. My brush becomes like a carving tool. And so I do a similar shape, and then maybe do a medium-sized one. And this is just something I found to work for me in composition, is trying to train myself to make small, medium, and large. Thinking in 3s, because it's an odd number and doesn't end up producing unexpected symmetry. So now I just have these flat pieces of this rock that are 3 different sizes, and so it has more of an organic look to it. All right, then within that, I might make some brighter areas that are just like where the light's catching it. Just make some little chopped off areas. So I start with bigger shapes. Now I'm adding little shapes within those areas, like this. And that rock is going to look a whole lot more natural if I add some reflection on it of the surrounding colors. So maybe I take this and I'm going to add a little bit of blue.
So you said earlier that the reflection is darker than the source, but why is the reflection lighter? Okay,
yeah. So that is a very good question. And if I said that it's darker than the source, then that's probably the wrong way to say that. What it is weaker than the source. It's weaker. So if it's mixed with a dark color, it's going to end up being darker than the source. So in this case, these reflections are mixed with the muddy underwater color. So it's darker than the source. But let's say that we're on a beach and it's shallow and the sun is blasting through the water, or this shallow water. This is where the sun is making it through the water and showing the brown of the dirt. So then if that underwater color is lighter than the object, then my reflection is going to be lighter than the source, because it's a percentage of the underwater and a percentage of the source color. That's all it is. And if you just do that math, then it'll tell you whether it should be lighter or darker. It depends how deep the water is or what color the dirt is, and that's for you to decide. And I'm glad you asked that question, because that's a good clarification to have. Now, if I add blue to this rock, just right along the edge where it's bending away, then it's going to look like that rock is reflecting these colors that are behind it, and it's going to make it look a lot more three-dimensional in my picture. So I always do these bluer highlights along the edges of my objects that are, well, bluer just in this case because there's bluer light hitting it. You know, I would use the same thing regardless of the color. So right here we just have some reflection hitting that rock. You know, maybe there's a little bit coming down that edge right there. Maybe we make some little edges of rock coming down, and then I better do it in my reflection too. Put a little bit in there. So on any edge that's going away from me, just like the water, as it tilts away from me, I just want to make it more the color of whatever is behind it that it would be reflecting. Right here, I can even do it along this edge. I can do that blue, that light blue strip, and this blue is mixing with the gray, so it's not an intense blue. It's just a subtle border that just helps my object to look more three-dimensional, just because it has that little bit of blue right there. And what if it was, you know, what if you had a rock underneath this? Here, let's put a rock under this guy. Yeah. All right, so this is a rock that's maybe shooting out. I'm just using pure black, you know, just like they teach you in art class. You know, when you're trying to decide what to put in your painting, just take a big blob of pure black and just draw it right on your picture. All right. Did everybody not learn that in art class? All right, and then I'm going to make this rock coming out of the water down here. Like this.
Would it be possible to add a mermaid to this?
Oh my gosh, please. Please don't make me paint another mermaid. Yes, it's possible.
Just a mermaid coming through your falls.
Yeah,
Don't do that.
in the Midwest. Yeah, we're in Tennessee.
Midwestern mermaid.
Yeah. All right, so check this out. Now, right here, this is just a subtle effect. But on this edge, you know, I'm thinking about what light is back there that's going to reflect off the edges. So I'm treating this rock like it has water on it. So back here, I know there's some green trees, there's blue sky. So I'm going to put a lot of blues on this far edge here. All right, and I'm just going to take this white and blue and put it along these edges. And that's going to give me a nice three-dimensional shape right here. But as it comes closer to me, it's now underneath this red tree. So I'm gonna put the red on it. Everything in a picture is light. It's light. It's a light source. It's a flashlight. It's a red light shining on the rock. So I'm gonna put red right here. And I'll use that color just right next to this, you know, just right where I think the red might be shining on that rock. Right, but it's not bright, it's just subtle because it's underneath this. It's kind of a dull red light because it's underneath that shaded tree right there. And then, you know, what color is right here? Maybe there's a hard light. Maybe this looks like the sun is maybe up over our heads and a little bit to the right, the way I have this staged. So maybe there's a hard light on this. So generally, when I say hard light, I mean all coming from the exact same direction like the sun. And it's all coming straight down and making very vivid, sharp lines, shadows. Right? That's what I'm referring to as a hard light, where a soft light is coming from multiple directions, like the big blue sky. So you don't have any sharp lines in the shadows. It's all soft and blurred together because it's coming from so many different angles. But this is a hard light, and I usually do those after I establish my soft light, just because I found it just to be a better strategy for me. So then,
did you say where you're? Like, is it your? Like,
yeah, so I'm just deciding based on what this looks like that I've got my clouds shaded in a way that the sun would be somewhat overhead, and it's up for grabs whether it's a little to the left or to the right. You know, I'm just gonna decide that it's up here a little to the right, and we'll say it's shining down here, and it's gonna cast the shadow of this tree on this rock. So right here, I'll just add a little bit of yellow to it, for kind of a little bit of a gold color from the sunlight. Here. There. Now I might have to put a lot of white on this to get it to show up because it's mixing with the black as I go. My colors mix all the time, and usually that's okay because it's all a mix anyway. You know, it's a combination of this light and that light, and I want the colors to mix. All right, so I've got this bright edge on this rock coming out here, and then maybe I'll just make a few horizontal strips where it's peeking through the leaves a little bit. And again, it's that brush technique, using just the tip of that brush to get the smaller lines. You know, I just put the point right at it. Like that. Yeah, here's your impressionistic painting for sure. All right, now I've got my indirect light, and so if you saw this painting finished, you'd say that this is the shadow. You'd say the shadow, but I didn't think of it as a shadow. I thought of it as a light. I decided the color of that light by judging what was nearby and what would be influencing it the most. So I had the red shining on it. I had a little bit of the blue, and then I just added a brighter light coming from up here. So in my whole painting, I just think of everything as a light and imagine what angles it's hitting and where it's going to reflect that. Now, if you just consider that and, you know, review this video a few times, then you'll be able to paint exactly like me every time. Right, Todd?
Yeah, that's how I do it.
No, that is not the case. I never mean to mislead anyone, but it's not for me to judge anybody's potential. I always hated being held back from knowledge and people not sharing things. You know, who's to say how good you may become? My hope is that I would see people do much better paintings than I've ever done, and hopefully say, Joe helped me along the way. And that would just be the biggest thrill in my life. All right, so now to make this picture look more complete, I got to finish up this background right here. So right here, I think it could use maybe some rocks, because that's what's in my brush. Do a little bit here, and if we're going to do that, then we better put it in the reflection too. Let's just put a tiny bit of blue in there and just make it a little bit darker. So again, I'm making it darker, but that's only because I've decided that under this water is a darker color. If this was shallow water and the sun was lighting it up, then I would make it a percentage of that lighter color. We got this reflection here. Now I want to make sure to have good perspective. I want to really flatten out my shapes. The tiniest bit of vertical change. So what I mean by vertical change is look at this little spot where it ramps up a little bit. It's very small. If I move that down here, it's just a little nick on a rock. But back here, it represents 20 feet. So I want to be careful that I don't put too much vertical change in my lines. Very horizontal, like everything just got smashed down. All right, how about some white? Let's put some, oh, that's not right because I said the sun was coming from that way. Let's modify that. See, it matters to me. I care about keeping the story straight in the picture. All right, we have this funny looking rock formation up here. See, once again, I'm just kind of cutting off pieces of it. Try to make it look like it's been broken. Right here. Now I better do some in here. I'm going to use horizontal lines to create the same shapes. Just borrow some of that paint right there. Here. There we go. Now we've got a reflection of that. Here's a little trick I learned from Bob Ross, one of my heroes. Somebody that cared more about people than his fancy schmancy artwork. Take a tiny bit of white. Just go right along this bank, and it's just a nice little highlight. And you can overdo this real easy, and my hands are so shaky. I mean, they're just so shaky, it's ridiculous. So I have a real hard time keeping this line real subtle. But if you look in nature, you won't see this very much. I mean, this is really amplifying this effect. But it looks cool. It really looks like the water catching the light as it ramps up. And here, as it's flat, it's catching this reflection, but as it turns up, it starts to grab the sky reflection. So you can just cheat a little bit and brighten it up and really enhance the edge of the water there and make it look a little bit more finished. Like there's an edge on that. And then I think it'd look cool to have some bright spots on this bank, some bright colors. So how about some real light orange here? Make an orange. And I'll add a ton of white to that so that it looks like bright sun hitting that bank. Yeah. And I want to leave this little bit of dark by the bank down here because it looks like mud. It looks like where it's more wet. Kind of already lost it. It's okay.
Speaking of Bob Ross, do you ever work with knives?
No, I don't. That's one of the super cool things he did. I've never tried. Seems super fun. I think he was way cool because he would get the effect that would achieve the look of an object with the most minimal amount of effort. Just the very basic knowledge of the subject and just put that key element in there. But I think because I'm always more obsessed with the many elements of an object, I would be frustrated at what I wasn't producing with the knife, even though it would look, even though as he did it, it has the potential to make a really awesome looking picture. See, I say that. The truth is I'm just scared that I wouldn't be as good as Bob Ross. All right, so now I'm just making this bright color come up here on the bank, like a few hard shadows where the trees are, some shadows going up into this forest here.
My cat looks like a pigeon asks, can you paint snow or rain effect with acrylics paint? Every painting I've seen with rain effects are done with watercolors.
Okay, so the question is,
can you do rain or snow with?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you can paint anything with acrylics. It just changes. The dry time makes it less convenient to do fine details. But the key element in a picture is the color. The key element that makes you see one substance or another is the color and the way the shadows work with the light. I mean, I could put snow in this picture right now. You can't. It's
We're
easy.
probably gonna need to wrap up here a little bit, so maybe
Okay.
on something too ambitious here.
Yeah. Well, hey, this was a good trial run for us. I really wanted to see if this could work, doing this kind of a broadcast. It's really convenient for me if I can just answer questions all at the same time, same place. So if this works out good, then I'll be doing more of them on my channel. And I know that this was just a last minute thing. A ton of people are going to see they didn't have the chance to join in. I'm sorry about that, but I just had to see if we could just run this live stream. And I'm hoping to do a whole lot more of it in the future. So I'm going to call this painting finished because I'm feeling pretty bored with it. It's just a boring landscape.
What about that bottom left? Are you going to clean that up at all?
Oh, I should do that, yeah.
How do you finish off a painting like this? That's my question.
You just decide that you're done working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not here, let's finish.
Like that wall out there that you're working on. You're like, I'm done.
Lost interest a long time ago. Yeah. You're right. Come on, let's make this a finished picture.
I'm going to hang this on my wall. It's got to look good, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Here.
Or if Christy's going to hang it on her wall.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm doing a ton of paintings over the winter here. And so we're going to have a pretty large collection floating around here.
And you could even ask, like, in chat, ask when's convenient time when the people like to watch.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, so here's the reflection of my rock coming back. Remember this three-dimensional image, so I'm not just making like upside down image of my rock reflection. I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna add brown to it so it's more subtle. Yeah, this definitely wasn't much of a how to paint clouds video, was it?
Well, it's kind of like how to paint clouds and then cover them up with a tree.
Yeah.
It's kind of that.
Yeah. It was kind of that. That's true. All right. So I'm just trying to get just the right balance of my black and my brown for this rock. Brown of my dirt, the dark color of my rock, and then I'm just going to throw a little bit of white around the edge, just like I did on that background thing, just to define that.
And just somebody asked about just raffling this painting to you, and maybe you could always we could put up like a survey where they put their email address in and answer something that you raffle it off.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea because, I got in trouble for storing that last one I posted, that big stormy ocean scene that I just posted, that sat in the basement where I was working for quite a long time. My dad came over and saw it. He's like, you just have this sitting in a basement. He took it over to the art professor at the university. And that's why I'm gonna do these paintings for the gallery in the spring. All right, so see, I just put those little bits of white to just enhance that edge, because you would get a lighter reflection as it ramps up. Just probably wouldn't be that bright, but it might be if the sun.
On a lucky day.
if the sun was shining from here and bouncing off here, it would probably come right toward you, right about in there. So it's okay to have a brighter spot right there. And, you know, if this rock was wet, then you might have a little bright spot right there, and maybe here, and maybe here. Let's see, I think these little white highlights are fun. Let's do some in here. Sun, so here's, yeah, on the faces of the water is where you're gonna see it. Just little dots of white. Less and less reflection as you get close, you know. All right, we'll call that good. I kind of don't like the way those are so roundy. All right. What do you think? Should we raffle it off? I mean, I told you you could have it when it was over because I don't want to take it home with me. So, do we give it away? Todd? Hey, should Todd give it away?
You decide. That's one way.
How many people did we have tuned in? How many people are we disappointing if we don't get?
There's like 50 people live right now. Yeah.
Okay, so now if we don't give it away, we're kind of bad guys. I'm just saying.
It's true. We are bad guys.
No, we don't have to give this away. Come on, we'll do another. We'll do another.
Yeah. So it would be interesting. I think it would be good to, you know, like, you know, YouTube, it's hard to tell who everyone is, but if you let them like submit their info like as a raffle, maybe that's how we should start the show next time or something like that. Yeah, we'll do it next time. We'll do it next time. I did hey, that's not you. Nobody would like it if you were told you could have the picture and then said, no, actually, we're going to raffle it. We don't want to do that to Todd. That's not fair to him. He was good to let us use the space, be the technical guy. That was his payment for his time. And he makes a whole lot more money, you know, with his normal job than he does being my technician. So, you know, that white spot right there is just too much. It's just too much. I got to fix that. Here we go. Just want it to be skinnier. There we go. So when you run out of canvas to mess around with, here's the other teaching technique. The palm of your hand is also the best place to mix.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's so good. Yeah. It's perfect. Yeah, this is fun. Yeah, let's do a little bit of the wave. How to paint waves, right? It's something I just released here. Let's do some real subtle little waves in here. This is a good way to put perspective in your water too. As I get this way, they're getting closer together. That's something we worked on in the workshop a few weeks ago. They're going to get more horizontal and close to each other as they get to the top because they're going toward a vanishing point that's somewhere off of the picture. You know, so if these are just subtle little waves, just a fun little enhancement to the picture. Oh yeah, and there'd be a cloud, you know, those cloud reflections. Those would be somewhere down in here. You know, I think a lot of times it's easy to be unconscious of what your brush strokes are suggesting by their direction. They have a direction, and your eyes are just so sensitive to lines. Every time you make a brush stroke, it creates a line. So you want to be planned out about which direction you make those lines. This is creating perspective in my picture because they're all shrinking toward an imaginary vanishing point that's off the picture. Going that way. So you know I have some fun little waves in the picture. That one doesn't look good. I'm leaving it. All right, let's get this thing signed and be done with this video, right? Let's see if I can sign this with my shaky hands. Joe. We go this way and then here. Joe. This has always been kind of a branding issue for me. You know, I always signed him Joe C for Cornelius. And then I became Mural Joe. But I still sign them that way so that I have consistency, you know. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. We're gonna be out of here now. I got to finish doing this backdrop for Todd's big convention that they're hosting. They have their show at United. I forget what you call it, but it's a big deal, and I'm doing some faux finishing, something that I really hate to do. But he talked me into coming down.
Twisted your arm.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, he's doing a live show for me. Yeah, so he's doing some faux painting. I'll post pictures of the finish on Facebook.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.